before we go into the next session, I am remiss without having mentioned our signature emergency response fund for human rights defenders and activists, which is our Lifeline Embattled NGO or CSO fund, which is also more information on the fact sheet. We're very proud of this fund, which enables organizations around the world, whether they're registered or not, to be able to get quick access to money, again, help them pay for lawyers' fees, improving their security, relocation if they need to. It's implemented by a consortium, and it's funded by 17 other donors around the world, so we're very proud of this. So I didn't mean to leave that very important signature effort out. Okay, now we're going to turn to the next session, where I'm going to go through a very quick and rapid introduction to the structure of DRL, how it's organized. Can somebody hit the lights so this stands out a little bit more? Oh, thank you. As well as talk about some of the programs and diplomacy that we do. The mission of the State Department in terms of DRL is to create a more secure, democratic, and prosperous world for the benefit of the American people and the international community. So that's one of the goals of the State Department. We drilled down a little further into the mission for DRL itself, to be a focal point for department efforts to promote democracy and human rights to ensure a more peaceful and secure world. I think that's pretty clear that this is something to benefit the world, the U.S. How can we get to this peaceful and just world? A little bit now about the structure of DRL. At its heart, we are a policy office. That is, we are continually nudging the State Department, the international community in the work that we do, that we are constantly putting human rights and democracy at the forefront of our policies, promoting them through our diplomacy and our programs. Within DRL, we have regional offices for each of the 6 regions of the world, mirroring very much the State Department, which also has regional bureaus for every region of the world. We also have a number of special envoys. You saw Judy Heumann here today, who is our special envoy for disabilities. Ira Foreman, who is our special envoy for combating anti-Semitism. We have a nominee out there to be our ambassador at large for religious freedom, who's not yet been confirmed. And we also have a special envoy for labor, who at the moment is being fulfilled by Bruce Levine. We have an office for, as you saw, multilateral and global affairs, which particularly focuses on the United Nations and other international organizations and using them as a means of promoting human rights and democracy. They also have the Office for Business and Human Rights, as well as experts in civil society and internet freedom. We have an office for policy planning and development. It's actually public affairs, policy planning, development. They're our public affairs office. They do the outreach. They set up meetings to bring in the international community. To bring in the public community. They manage our website, humanrights.gov, which is a fount of information. If you've not gone to that website before, it's not just about DRL, it's about everything the U.S. government is doing to promote human rights. We have a new office, brand new, for security and human rights, which is particularly focusing on issues of security sector abuses, including the Leahy vetting that we must undergo for all assistance that we give to security forces abroad. It works very closely with the Pentagon to ensure that our policies are doing its best to prevent and address security sector abuses. And all embassies abroad, every single embassy does have a DRL assigned human rights officer. There is someone there at every embassy that activists, that anyone can go to if they have issues, they should be able to access this officer. They're also the person who does the first draft of the human rights reports that we put out every year. So that's the big structure of DRL. And of course, we have the Office of Global Programming to complement those policies with our programs on the ground. They manage the Human Rights and Democracy Fund that was established by Congress in 1998. Our Human Rights and Democracy Fund, HRDF, is our flagship programming mechanism to promote programs, to award programs that address in real time challenges and opportunities to democracy and human rights around the world. as I say, in real time, because we are focused on the actual situation on the ground. We're looking in the short term, medium term. We work with our colleagues very closely at AID, particularly their Center for Excellence in Democracy, Human Rights and Governance, to look at the more longer term institution building complement to our short term immediate focus. We have HRDF projects that focus on opening political space in struggling and nascent democracies and authoritarian regimes, where we feel the U.S. government can effect positive change. And when I say the U.S. government can effect positive change, that means by working with all of you as our implementing partners. And our programming support falls into the 4 broad pillars, which are the pillars that guide our strategic objectives as a bureau. First and foremost, to promote respect for and protection of fundamental human rights. One of our pillars is also to promote inclusive political processes that reflect the will of the people. We also are focused on supporting accountable and effective institutions of government that are ruled by the rule of law, governed by the rule of law. And lastly, to support vibrant civil societies, including NGOs, and a free and independent press. So it is within those 4 pillars that all of our programs can be organized to say they are promoting one of those 4 broad pillars. Let me get into now how we take our money and focus it on particular objectives. They focus on the objectives as identified by the administration, by the president, by the White House, by the secretary, Secretary Kerry, as well as our assistant secretary. We use those guidelines, those policy objectives as we put them, to say how should we be focusing and allocating our money. Our programs do cover every region in the world and a wide range of thematic issues, some of which you heard today: labor, business and human rights, internet freedom, religious freedom, disabilities, transitional justice, and international forensics. We're the ones at the forefront, as you heard, promoting transitional justice in post-conflict societies, as well as dealing with conflict societies of documenting and reporting on human rights abuses. We also have, as I said, a focus on combating anti-Semitism, combating gender-based violence. We work very closely with the Office of Global Women's Issues on developing our programs there. We also have a focus on LGBT, promoting and protecting the rights of LGBT persons. We obviously, support media in terms of independent and objective media, whether it be journalists, media outlets, whether it be doing online journalism, citizen journalism. And lastly, on elections as a process for ensuring the will of the people are heard. We also have, as you've heard, our emergency response funds and programs. Again, I urge you to pick up a fact sheet that lays out the different funds, what they do, and how they can be accessed by individuals and activists on the ground, as well as you referring people to them. I would say as implementing partners, because you do have your boots on the ground, your Birkenstocks on the ground. Our approach, I'm sure, by activists and organizations needing help, please do refer them to these funds. That's what they're there for, and they're only as good as it's known out there that these funds are available for use. This is to show you the situation for funding for our Human Rights and Democracy Fund. As you can see, we started out very, very small in fiscal year 1998, which I can tell you at that time was focused very much on the Balkans and post-conflict Bosnia and Kosovo, and we have grown tremendously over the years, where we're now averaging about $70 million as appropriated by Congress. But I should also point out that we do get money from other regional bureaus and bureaus in the State Department to program part of the funding that they get, whether it be economic support funds, ESF, in the past IECA funds from the former Soviet Union. Sometimes we get INCL funding from our colleagues in the Bureau of Law Enforcement. So that, and then there are specific regional budgets, country-specific budgets such as Iraq, Pakistan, Cuba, and the NERD funding that we also get funding. So our funding generally is, half of it is directly appropriated from Congress through our Human Rights and Democracy Fund. About half of that, it's doubled approximately, with funding that we receive from other bureaus. So in any given year, we're funding between 130, sometimes up to $200 million worth of programming, depending upon what the Iraq budget looks like. So let me go through now the processes and procedures, and I think it will also get at the question of how is it that we come at the RFPs, the requests for proposals that we do every year, and how is it that we capture some things and not other things. Okay. First of all, in the Office of Global Programming, we have over 30 GORs, or Grants Officer Representatives, or Program Officers. They are your primary contacts on regional and thematic programs. They are all here today. I think they're wearing badges saying, ask me about this country, or ask me about this region, or ask me about this particular theme. So there will be plenty of opportunities for you to network with them this afternoon and to go up and ask them more specific questions. And along with those 30 key people, we also have various other people. We have our program specialists who also work on various regions and thematic areas, and then our program management people who make the money actually flow and hands off to them. That they're the ones that make sure actually that you get paid, that your grants actually work through the system. As you heard, over fiscal years, the past 2 fiscal years of funding, 2012 and 2013, we did obligate nearly $270 million. And we currently have 329 open grants around the world, ongoing programs around the world. Just for you geeks of understanding the fiscal year process, why we are now, as of October 1st, in fiscal year 15. As you know, there is actually no fiscal year 15 budget because Congress has not appropriated it yet. But our funding for ESF and HRDF is what's called 2-year monies. That means we have 2 years to fund it, to obligate it. So we are now starting the cycle of FY14 money. That is, we're now starting to spend 14. So we don't have to worry about not having the 15-year budget yet. We're starting on the 14 monies, and you will see this in the coming months. We will start to roll out our next slate of requests for proposals because we just finished obligating all the money for our FY13, which expired at the end of September. So let me go through now how this solicitation process works so that you can kind of figure there is definitely a method to our madness, what might appear to be random allocation or random solicitations. We do actually have a process. It starts with our allocation of funding. So what we do is we take that $70 million a year and we look at what our priorities are, as I said, coming from the president, from the secretary. We also look at what's in our human rights reports and other evidence-based reports that are out there, putting those together again with the priorities that have been identified from the president on down, and looking then at what other agencies do, particularly looking at what USAID is doing in the space of democracy and human rights. But we also look at what INL might be doing or what the Global Women's Issues Office might be doing. And we take all of those information together. What are our priorities? What's being done? Where are the gaps? What do we think we need to be focusing our money on? And all of that gets put into a mixture, and out comes what's called our Foreign Ops Plan, which is then reviewed by all the embassies around the world and all the bureaus in the State Department, and gets final approval by the Department's Office of U.S. Foreign Assistance, commonly known as F. So it's a very open, transparent process that has many steps along the way where there are people weighing in and saying, you need to look at this, you shouldn't be looking at this is more important. And that's how we actually then take and allocate the money that we eventually then do award to all of you. So once we have our Foreign Ops Plan approved, that lays out how much money we're going to put towards what countries or what themes. Then we start the solicitation process. We award all of our foreign assistance through a fair, open, and competitive solicitation process. That is, it's very transparent. It is always a competitive process. As you note, there is an asterisk here. Some of our programs that are very sensitive because of the nature of what the programming is or because of where we're doing it, may be done through what's called a limited solicitation process. It's still competitive, but it might not be publicly advertised. It goes to a limited group of potential implementing partners who we know can operate in these areas and are on these themes. That's why I would urge you to make sure we do have your business cards to add you onto these lists. But you can also, as I say, as it says here, provide that information about the type of work you do by going to the website DRL program info at state.gov. Again, as you know, you've heard, we do all of our work, as I put it, in the garden spots of the world, that we have to consider the safety not only of the participants but of you. Thus, many times we have to resort to a limited solicitation process. So what we do then for the solicitation process is we put out what's called a request for proposals or a request for statements of interest. Those SOIs or RFPs are all posted on Grant Solutions, as well as grants.gov, as well as DRL's website. Those are the three sources that you should constantly be checking for where we post those solicitations, whether they be proposals or SOIs. You have to be registered to go onto grants.gov, as well as Grant Solutions. So that's one of the things, if you're not there, I would urge you to register with those. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. I have my experts over here. Unfortunately, we cannot help you with your applications to become registered on grants.gov or grantsolutions.gov. On there, they will have a help desk. You have to go to that help desk. It's not because we don't want to help you, but we can't help you because it's not, those two websites are not managed by DRL. I know it can be tricky. We urge you to do that sooner than later. Don't start thinking about this when there is a solicitation out there. Start now if you think that there's a remote possibility you're going to be applying for money. All of the solicitations that we post in the SOI or the RFP process is award language that is pending appropriations. We may not have the money yet. Sometimes we solicit before we have the funding. It's pending congressional notification. Every penny of money that we spend, we must notify to Congress. We must tell them this is where we are actually spending the money you have appropriated. They then have to quasi-approve that. So we cannot spend anything until Congress has approved it when we've sent up what's called a CN to the Hill. And of course, we must have the money here in the building, in our bank account, so to speak. So while we can post SOIs and RFPs, that does not guarantee that that money will actually be spent on that. We do our best. We do not want to make you do work needlessly, but we must tell you it's contingent on those three things happening, that it's been appropriated, it's been notified and approved, and we actually have the money. That might explain sometimes why our solicitation process may appear to take months, because sometimes we're still trying to get through one of those three hoops that we have to go through. Okay, the technical requirements for approving. Please, please look at our PSI, that is our proposal submission instructions, which are listed on our website, which is kind of complicated because you have to now go through an extra layer. When you go to state.gov, you go through the layer of J, that is we are now part of the Undersecretariat for Citizen Security and Civilian Security and Democracy and Human Rights, thank you. They just renamed it, sorry. That's the J that you see there. Don't ask why they named it J, but it is. And then you get to DRL P for programming. So that's where you will see these PSIs. We try not to change them, but they do change. So just because you looked at the PSI last year or 2 years ago, you should go look. I think we recently, it's not uploaded yet, but stay tuned, there will be a change. By next week, okay. So that's what you should look at. That's the things, the do's and don'ts that you need to follow when you're applying. You also need to fill out standard forms 424 and 424B. The instructions are provided on that. I'm looking at these people, okay. All right, and secondly, you must actually apply. You must submit an application that unfortunately must be in English. And you must include a budget that is in United States dollars. You can put your budget together in whatever currency, but you must then change it using currency exchanges to put it into dollars. I think actually the State Department has a website with the currency exchange rates if you're dealing particularly with some odd, obscure currency out there. I'm just checking my binders here, right? Okay. All right, so who is eligible to apply? And again, this is important because our PSIs, our instructions have changed in the past. It said US-based organizations. That is not correct. Those who are eligible to apply can be US-based or foreign-based NGOs or PVOs, private voluntary organizations, regardless of registration status. We work very hard to uphold what's called the Brownback Amendment, which says we cannot allow another government to veto who we work with. So we are not insisting that if you're working, you yourself are not registered in a country or organization you want to work with are not registered. Unfortunately, there are too many authoritarian governments out there who refuse to register NGOs. We do not insist that they be registered. PIOs can also apply, public international organizations. That might be ILO, IOM, those types of organizations. Colleges, universities, and institutions of educational can apply, but you will see in our PSI and in our instructions, we do not generally support research. We very much discourage scholarly research that does not have direct application. Occasionally we do, but generally we strongly discourage that. And under certain circumstances and conditions, we do allow for-profits to apply. That generally has to do with our internet freedom. But it does note when it is. Kat? Okay, she'll explain. Okay, so tips for a good proposal. We have criteria that we use, 8 criteria, I believe, to evaluate proposals. That's also in each RFP or at SOI. It lists the criteria for evaluation. This is also in our SOI. The number 1 criteria, though, is quality of the program idea. That is that you've got a great idea to address whatever the objective is that we've laid out in that SOI or that RFP. Your program has to be responsive to that. That's what we call being responsive to the solicitation. So if we're saying our objective is to address the rights of the disabled in this country, your solicitation better address the rights of the disabled. Sorry. That is the number 1. If you don't do that, that is one reason for technical disqualification. You should also have a proposal that is appropriate for the environment, the operating environment. Most of the time when we're operating in sensitive areas or conflict areas, we will insist that you have a contingency plan. How will you continue to do that program if you get shut down, if war breaks out, if people are being kicked out? So it's important for you to note that you get it, that this is a dangerous or risky place. We aren't risk adverse. In fact, that's mainly what we are about, that we are willing to go into risky areas or sensitive areas, but we want you to acknowledge that you know what you're doing and you can handle that. And of course, we are looking for innovation. Again, you're the ones close to the ground, you're on the front lines, you know what could be done in those types of situations, whether it be a technology or old-fashioned technology, of what technology could be behind it, or a new way of approaching a program. Many times we do have to use a roundabout way to address a human rights issue. That's what we're looking to you for: innovation, responsiveness, appropriateness. As you will note, most of our RFPs or SOIs are generally very broad, because we do want to encourage that innovation. We'll tell you what we're looking for as an end goal, what we're trying to achieve, but we leave it open to you to give us your best ideas about how to achieve that goal. So for programming, planning, and ability to achieve your objectives, these are the criteria that we use to evaluate. So that criteria for programming, planning, and ability: you must articulate the linkage between what the project activities are and the actual objectives of the program. So your activities might be training, but you've got to tell us how that training is going to get us to the rights of the disabled. You've got to make a very clear linkage between the two. So you might have the best program that lays out, you've got the best way of training people, but if you can't tell us how training people are going to affect change on the ground, again, you're going to get scored lower on that. You need to clearly define what your work plan is with a timeline. Again, we appreciate in many of these countries, it's very slow going, so we're not going to penalize you for saying, look, we're going to have to take this step by step, but tell us how you're going to get from here to there. And if we think your timeline is too slow, trust me, we'll get back to you and tell you that during the recommendation and conditions stage, should you make it that far. You must identify who the stakeholders are and the local partners are. Because many of these places, again, where we operate, is difficult for small organizations to get access directly to federal funding, we rely on you to be our link to those groups on the ground. So most of the time our RFPs or SOIs will say, we expect you to work with local organizations. Sometimes there's actually a small grants component in there. But that, identifying who the stakeholders are, saying, I know who the players are in this country or on this issue, and we've identified who we're going to work with, shows us that you really do know the situation on the ground. You're plugged in. And that's a big plus when we're going through and evaluating, of saying, these people, they're probably going to be able to do it because they already know what needs to be done and who the players are and who they can work with. So that's very important to identify that. A third criteria is multiplier effect and sustainability. In particular, what we're looking for is something that would demonstrate that the project will have a lasting effect beyond either the direct beneficiaries or the life of the grant. Now, again, we understand many of these places where we're working aren't going to necessarily be financially sustainable. We unfortunately can't expect that NGOs, local NGOs, are going to be able to get grant money from their government. So we expect, what we're looking for, though, is creativity of saying, if you're strengthening an organization, that they get it, that they need to be able to continue to either find funding or secure more volunteers or what have you. But something that gives a nod to saying, even under the most difficult circumstances, we think there's going to be sustainability. And it might simply be, if you're coming up with a curriculum for teachers, that those teachers are going to go out and work with other teachers or other schools. So we expect you to be creative here. We're not expecting a multi-million-dollar program to sustain itself through other financing, even though that is sometimes possible. But we do expect you to think about, even in the worst environments, there's got to be some lead behind. Fourth criteria for evaluation is your monitoring and evaluation plan. What we need to see from you are good outcome indicators, not outputs, not how many people you are going to train or how many articles you are going to publish or how many meetings you're going to have. What we need are outcomes. That is, what is the change that you're going to see through your program? Ideally, you will have a baseline and then the target outcomes. Again, we want you to be ambitious. We won't penalize you for being ambitious and you're not able to do it in these environments, but we expect you to think that through. But really focus on those outcomes and not the outputs. And you'll hear more about this today on our session on monitoring evaluation. And we expect you to have, include in your request, put in your budget for an external evaluation, a final one at least, and a midterm, particularly for programs that we're kind of seeing how this is going, whether you need to do a course correction. We'd encourage you to budget for a midterm one to say, how is this going? Maybe we need to change things. Maybe we need to tweak things. That midterm evaluation will allow you to see that and allow us to see it too. Again, we won't penalize you, but we want to be able to see that you're in fact looking at it and making whatever corrections or changes that need to be done. Fifth criteria for evaluation are your record and capacity, so the institution's record and capacity. That means that you have a proven track record as a grantee. Maybe not for DRL, but you've gotten money from AID, you've gotten money from the EU. If you note that in there, again, it makes us feel more comfortable that you can manage funding. Because these are taxpayers' money, we have to be careful that taxpayer money is being managed with due diligence, so that helps us get insight into, yes, you at least have had that experience. It doesn't mean you have to, but if you want to say you have you could be taking classes on managing federal funds, correct? Or hire somebody that has that experience. So for you total newbies, that's something you might want to think about. That when you're hiring a program manager, it'd be good to hire somebody who has prior experience in managing federal funds. And that you have sufficient resources and expertise to do it, hence that you've got somebody on your staff And by sufficient resources, that means that you've thought about, you have the number of people, the right number of people to actually manage the program. So again, don't skimp on the staff. If you come in and say, well, I'm going to manage a $1 million program with 2 people, might indicate to us you may not have thought that through. 6th criteria is cost effectiveness. Again, this is where we are looking at what you're budgeting. The first part is your administration and your travel costs. Are those reasonable? Obviously, travel costs, you should be using the State Department per diem, again, on the State Department website. And again, reasonable administration. Yes, we expect you to have the right number of staff, but we don't want you to bloat it. And I can tell you a lot of times we look at headquarter costs versus field costs. So think about that very, very carefully when you're putting that together. Cost sharing, it's suggested, but it's not required. That is where you've said that you've identified funding from another source, or you're kicking in some of your own money. So it might be that you're providing some in-kind expertise, but you have to list this out and you have to be able to document it, right? We have unreport out on it. So don't say, oh, somebody else is going to fund half of this project and you can't actually document it. You will have to be able to do that. If you have any questions about that, please ask us how you can types of cost sharing that is allowable. We also strongly encourage public-private partnerships. Again, perhaps you're working with a corporation, maybe they're kicking in, I don't know, software. Again, you're working with another agency, another international organization. That's something else that we encourage. Again, we don't expect it, but if you do it, that's always very, very welcome to squeeze, to keep our money, our little tiny pot of money, grow it as much as possible. Criteria number 7, risk management, contingency planning. I mentioned that before. Again, I can't think of very many programs that we don't do that aren't risky or operating in a risky environment. It's fine to say there is a possibility we might have to leave the country, or there's a very strong possibility this government is going to pass a law outlawing foreign funding. That's fine. We want you to recognize it and tell us how you're going to deal with it anyway. It might be you're taking things offshore. You might be taking things online. But please acknowledge it. That tells us that you're aware of the situation. We're not ever, as you heard our Assistant Secretary say, we're never going to shy away from trying to do programming even in the worst environments, but we want to know from you that you're actually capable of it and you've thought about it. So those are our criteria for evaluation. Now let me get to the paneling and review process. The very, very first step is that we have a team within DRL, our grants officer representatives or program officers, as well as our grants office, the AQM team. They look at this and determine if all the technical requirements are met. And when we say that, it can be anything from margins, page numbers, page length, those kinds of things. Again, we expect you to meet those things that are in the PSI or in the actual application. A lot of times we can do a request for proposals and we can get upwards of 300. I can guarantee you we are going through that and saying, look, they're not meeting these technical requirements. They're not going to be eligible for review. Can I say on this note too, if they don't submit all the documents, correct? If not all of the documents are uploaded or submitted in time, that's also something that could happen to deem your proposal not technically eligible. That's why we would encourage you, especially new ones, to submit it before the deadline. That way you can check to make sure all the documents were submitted. But I think we're going to hear more about that, correct? On tips?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so once we've gone through that and determined which ones are technically eligible, we take that pile and then we have a review process where all applications are reviewed and voted on by an interagency panel, which is just a fancy term for saying it's not just the State Department. We bring AID in where applicable, or Department of Labor where applicable, sometimes Department of Justice, to vote on and review all of the proposals. All of our proposals are sent out to the embassies for their comment, and so all embassies through their desk officers, the regional officer here, vote. So we have 4 core votes on every proposal. We have the desk/embassy vote, that is the regional bureau and the embassy, they have 1 vote. AID always votes unless it's someplace where they don't have a presence. The Office of Global Programming, GP, votes. And then within DRL, the second person votes is who is ever that regional desk officer. If it's a proposal for El Salvador, the desk officer will vote. It's if a program dealing with religious freedom, somebody from the IRF office will vote. Those are the 4 core votes. Sometimes we add in more depending upon whether it's a regional one, whether it's, again, cross-cutting a theme. So all of them vote on those proposals to make recommendations to the Assistant Secretary. When they're voting on those proposals, that's also when the panelists deem that they are going to attach certain recommendations and conditions to the proposal. So it might be that your proposal goes forward, but the panelists have also said, we're going to put some conditions on this. You must meet those conditions in a revised proposal. Otherwise, you can't get the grant. Recommendations are things we strongly encourage you to do. Many times it's simply clarification. So those votes, those recommendations are put together in what's called a recommendation memo to the Assistant Secretary for his approval. All of the DASs look at this, the Deputy Assistant Secretaries look at this, or one of the special envoys might look at it. They're all taking a chop at that and seeing if they agree with the recommendations put forward. But the final approval does rest with the Assistant Secretary. So he's taking the comments from the panel, the comments from the DASs, he's taking those all into account before he decides on what the final approved proposals will be. So he has the final approval, and then as I said, also we must have approval from Congress in terms of the congressional notification, the CN. Those 2 things have to happen then before we can actually issue a grant or a cooperative agreement or an interagency agreement. So that's the sausage making of what goes behind the solicitation process. So let me just go through this again so you can just sort of see this is the life cycle here. The pre-award stage, where we are putting together our ops plan, determining how we're going to allocate our money, drafting an RFP as SOI, and then paneling it and selecting it to reach who's the lucky winner of that particular solicitation. Then you start the negotiations. Should you be selected for that is when you start negotiating over the conditions, the recommendations. There might be some budgeting issues. This is where we have our AQM office, the grants officer getting involved. Okay, so that's the pre-award stage. If you made it to that stage, then kicks in the award stage. You have to get into the payment system. That's the PMS. You make sure that you're in that system, which happens to be run by HHS, I believe. So they're the ones who are authorized to actually issue your payments. And then the award is granted by the grants officer. The GO, the grants officer, which is not a part of DRL, that is under the A Bureau, the acquisitions people. I think some of them are here today too, and I think you'll be meeting some of them. So we've got it separated out. They're the ones who actually are signing the grants, awarding the grants. Post-award then. Very important that you communicate with your GOR, your grants officer representative, or your program officer about the management of the award. So this is key. And every grants award or cooperative agreement will have listed not only who the grants officer is, but who's the GOR, the grants officer representative. That's your go-to person to be communicating on day-to-day issues, problems that you're having. That person, though, is not authorized to make any changes in the grant. So that's only the grants officer who can do that. But communication is key. They're all here. There's 30 of them, and they're happy to hear from you. Those are the people you should be submitting your reports to, although that's all online now. It's all in your agreement. But they're the ones who are reviewing your quarterly reports. They're the ones who are approving the drawdowns that you have. So those are that you want to communicate with them. I can't urge that enough. Communication, communication, communication. Lastly, once the grant is done, you made it through all that and you've gone through your award, the grant is finishing out, you have what's called the closeout period, the closeout of the grant, sorry, where you have to submit your final performance reports, including financial reports. Those reports are retained then for at least 3 years. So this is how we finally are closing you, getting you off, signing you off of the books. So that's also important to us because if we have a grants open, sometimes that means that there's money floating around there that could be used for other purposes. But don't forget that part of the grants process. I think that's it. Oh, sorry. Timeline. Okay. RFPs, or SOIs, are posted at different times for different regions and themes. So I can't say we don't have a calendar that says this is popping out at this time, this time, this time. However, we generally have what we call our RFP season, which is going on right now. We like to have things between October and December. Sometimes it slips because things change on the ground. We get additional money. But that's generally when we are posting our RFPs. It's not a surprise because the end of the fiscal year has just ended. We've just finished obligating last year's funds, so now we're starting. So that's why you should see RFPs popping out. Sometimes we do them ahead of time, so don't count on that. But generally, this is when we like to do them. So frequently, I would urge you to frequently monitor new solicitations on Grant Solutions and grants.gov. I can't guarantee you that it's popping out during that time frame. Grants awards deadlines. We have to award all of our money now for fiscal year 14, which is $70.5 million. All that money will have to be awarded and obligated by September 30th of next year. So this is why we're saying we're starting this new cycle. Okay, so lastly, tips. As I said, set up your accounts early on grants.gov and grantsolutions.gov. I believe there's a way for you to set alerts. I think that something's coming out from DRL or democracy, human rights, internet freedom, what have you. We mentioned before, DUNS and a SAM/CCR number are required. You're going to hear more about that later, I hope. Oh, yes, that is important. Just because you have a DUNS number now or a SAM number now, they have to be updated annually. So that has happened to us in the past. At the last moment, we didn't realize that your DUNS has expired. So you should particularly have your program office make sure that those numbers are updated on a yearly basis. And once approved, your grant's approved, you should set up a PMS count quickly, so that you can start drawing down. And lastly, stay on top of those quarterly reports. Every grant has to submit quarterly reports, yearly reports, and your closeout reports. We do note that you were slow in submitting these things. That goes into our record as part of your organizational record and capacity. It has been noted that sometimes an organization is slow in getting their reports in, so you don't want to be in that situation. Now, there might be a reason because, yes, a conflict broke out, but what we expect you to do is either you submit something that says this needs to be updated, or you at least call your GOR and say you're going to be late for good reason, but we do note whether these things are coming in on time. And it's important for us because we have to report back out on these as stewards of taxpayer money. So help us, you have to help us do our job so that we can keep getting funding. So I think that is it.